From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parashat Emor, being even holier. Last week we already had the mandate, Kedoshim to you, that you should be holy. Now over and again the Parasha emphasizes that we should be holy to our God and we should not defile that holiness. V'tadishtem v'tem kedoshim, we were told, we should make ourselves holy, we should be holy, because I am God. All of a sudden, in this week's Parsha, we're asked to be even holier. What does it mean? All of a sudden, we're told that kedoshim yu le'olam, that the Kohen is to be holy to his God. V'kidashto, you should sanctify him. For I am Kadosh, Ani Hashem Kadishchem, I am God who makes you holy. What's going on? How can you be holier than the Jews? The Jews already are holier. What does it mean to be holy? And what does it mean to be even holier? In order to understand this, we need to take the approach Rabbi Soloveitchik had mentioned over the years. And it begins with the Mishnah in Kelim, the Mishnah that speaks about Eser Kedushot, the Mishnah that speaks about the idea that there are 10 levels of holiness when it comes to the sanctity of places. Kedushat Makom. Eretz Israel, land of Israel, is holier than other places. What is the holiness? You can't bring the Omer, the Bikurim, the Shtei Alechem, the 2 loaves of bread for Shavuos. You can't bring them from Memphis, from Indianapolis. You have to bring them from the land of Israel. That's the holiness of the land of Israel. And those cities that are surrounded with walls, they're also more holy than others, because you have to send out the lepers from those cities. And even now, inside the walls of Jerusalem, that's even holier. That's where you eat the Kadshim Kalim, those sacrifices which can be eaten by a non-Kohen. You can eat it there. The Maser Sheni, some of the tithes can be eaten there in Jerusalem. Harabayim Mekudash Menu, the Temple Mount is even holier, because a Zav or a Nida cannot go into that place. And then there's the Chel, the surrounding area, it's also very holy. A Gentile, those who are impure, cannot go in there. Ezrat Nashim, the women's section, is even holier, because even if the sun is not set, you still cannot come in that area. Ezrat Yisrael is even greater. Each section, different people can come in. It's even greater. Finally, of course, the Holy of Holies is the absolute holiest of them all. Only the high priest can come in, as we said last week, and only when he's doing this special worship. What does it mean that some places are holier than others? Rabbi Soloveitchik explained that it's the restrictions. If a place that has more restrictions than the previous place is holier than the next, the fact that it's restricted, you cannot bring this Omer offering from outside Israel, only from in Israel, or that certain people can't go in to this certain area, and even more people cannot go in to the next area, and almost no one can go into the Holy of Holies. The restriction is what makes it holier. So that's the story for Kedushat Makom, the sanctity of a place. What about the sanctity of an individual? So here we have this Parsha, that in what sense is a Jew to be holier than the nations around them? It's not some spiritual quality. It's very simply that we have more restrictions than others. We are told that we have to marry a Jewish person, for instance, that we cannot eat certain foods. These greater restrictions give us a potential for greater holiness. And what does it mean that a Kohen is holier? He is someone who cannot go to a funeral unless it's to his 7 closest relatives. And what does it mean that a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is even holier? Because he cannot go out for a funeral even for his relatives. And whereas the Kohen cannot marry a divorcee, the Kohen Gadol cannot even marry an almanah, he cannot marry a widow as well. He's further restricted, and with the greater restrictions comes greater holiness. And what does it mean to be a holy time? Greater restrictions. Yom Tov is holier than today, than a weekday, because on Yom Tov, I cannot do work, but I can cook. Shabbat is even holier, because on Shabbat, not only that, but I cannot cook as well. Greater restrictions, greater holiness, both in place, in time, and in terms of individuals. People wonder, what is this about Judaism? What is this about the Shabbos? Well, there's so many restrictions. It seems so confining and constraining. What kind of God, people wonder, would ask people to have so many restrictions? And the answer is that through these restrictions and through these constraints, we find our holiness. That place in which we're constrained, which we can't do certain things, it allows you to be even holier. Last week's Parashat, we spoke about the Orlah, the notion of first 3 years, you can't eat those fruits. That restriction, that notion that there's certain things we don't do, this leaves a space, perhaps, for the things that we can do, the things that can make us holier. This notion of constraining ourselves, recognizing that we need to step back. This allows us that space in which we can be holy. The idea of Jewish holiness is not simply closing your eyes and imagining you're off in the heavens, but it's here on earth, recognizing that what you do is more restricted than what came before. As Jews, we have tremendous restrictions, and this is what gives us our greater holiness. It would be fun to do all kinds of recreational activities on Shabbat. But what makes it holy, separate, and different is the notion that we are constrained and restricted on that day. And it's through these restrictions that we find our freedom. True freedom, true happiness, and true potential for holiness comes in that space where I recognize that I am not the master of my destiny, that I'm restricted, I'm constrained, and it's that in that constraint that I'm actually even more free. Rabbi Pelkovitz, my rabbi of youth, mentioned that there's a midrash that says that Yitzchak, Isaac, on the altar, he said, turned to his father and he said, God, bind me tighter, tighten me up even further with the ropes so that I won't flinch as you offer me as an offering. That's holiness, to understand that we are bound and restricted. A person who feels that they can say anything, do anything, that person doesn't feel safe. A person has no boundaries. Without boundaries, there's no holiness, there's no sanctity. The idea of holiness, holiness of a Kohen, holiness of a Jew, which we strive for, holiness of Israel, which is there, it's a matter of feeling that we're in a safe place. We know our restrictions, and it's in that restricted place we find our potential to really act on our true will and to be able to wait for that right moment, to be able to enter the Holy of Holies, to be able to marry that woman. And at that right moment, that's when we'll find our greatest holiness. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfar Beth El congregation for our discussion of holiness and Parashat Emor. Welcome to email me at rabbijmf@gmail.com. And join us again here in Memphis, Tennessee at the Anshe Sfar Beth El congregation. Thank you, Jason Lefkowitz, for making today's presentation possible. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.